sensibilities. That's why I keep my own views about religion very much to myself, unless there's an appropriate occasion to announce it. The last occasion on which I was put on the spot was in a church at an election hustings. Inevitably, I was asked by a Christian member of the electorate whether I believed in God. I was very disturbed myself, having to answer the question in that particular building, thinking any moment a piece of church masonry might fall on my head, when I had to declare I was a somewhat disquieted agnostic. And I think this is an occasion when, once again, it is appropriate for me to declare that, because it is important, particularly for those outside, in the media, to appreciate and accept that we adopted a very objective approach to our task, and the individuals that formed this delegation were objective in their outlook and in the way in which they wanted to view evidence. And also my background as a criminal lawyer came in rather handy. The theme with this report, and it will be the theme of reports in the future, it's been the theme of many thousands of reports in the past, is the issue of tolerance. The appeal and the message so frequently is around the world the message of please be tolerant to one another. And of course, there's always that paradox where I am intolerant of others' intolerance, and they may think that I am the one that is intolerant. And where do you draw the line? I suppose the difference is there are, as we identified, powerful and influential forces in Pakistan that are intolerant to nearly all others other than their own creed or rigid set of beliefs. That sort of intolerance I do not tolerate. What I'd like to just develop in closing and before passing on to Martin, who so skillfully chaired our meetings, and there were many of them over the course of the 9 days that we held, is you could say, the nuts and bolts of change. Let's perhaps just identify one material change. We can't expect a society to reform itself overnight and become religiously tolerant, but there are some step changes we've identified, and one which was of interest to me as a criminal lawyer of 26 years in this country, I'm well aware that frequently prosecutions are driven not necessarily by objectivity but by emotion. But in the United Kingdom we do have an independent Crown Prosecution Service, and we have a code for prosecutors, and each prosecutor who receives the file from the police who want to charge or have decided to charge should apply the principles of whether it is in the public interest to prosecute and whether there is sufficient evidence to continue the case in court. We thought that there is a role for the development of that ethos in the prosecuting departments in the various states of Pakistan. If there remained any doubt about the discrimination against religious minorities, let me just read section 295A of the Pakistan Penal Code, that's on page 17. Whoever, with deliberate and malicious intention of outraging the religious feelings of any class of the citizens of Pakistan, by words, either spoken or written, or by visible representations, insults or attempts to insult the religion or the religious beliefs of that class, shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may be extended to 10 years, or with a fine, or both. Now, what we learned in our 10 days, interviewing witnesses, and that was the point, to corroborate much of which we have already read in reports written by other worthy organisations, is that the Ahmadiyas are frequently having their religious beliefs disturbed and upset by the voices of others. And we weren't aware of a single prosecution ever being brought against
Well, I arrive on this delegation, if you like, as the generalist
I am chairman of the Solicitors International Human Rights Group, so yes, I have a knowledge about the general principles of international human rights standards, but actually in practice, I'm a criminal defence lawyer.
Right.
So what we want to do, as I've mentioned just a moment ago, is not simply rewrite the reports of others, which we can do for an armchair here, but to meet witnesses, meet complainants, and as a, you might say, tried and tested cross-examiner, obviously seek to ensure that there is consistency and authenticity in their accounts.
Thank you much to Eric for organizing our mission, and of course thank you very much for it was a difficult mission, but it was made easier by the excellent company and input of Tom and Lionel and Salim, and I must say the amazing hospitality of those who received us in Pakistan. And we haven't mentioned this, but the whole mission really extends its gratitude to our hosts, who were many members of the Ahmadiyya community in Karachi, in Rabwa, in Islamabad and Lahore. And I think I should kind of extend our condolences as well, because I think it is rare, even for a human rights lawyer, certainly for an academic, to go to a fact-finding mission, to be confronted with the problems and the issues already addressed by Lionel and Tom, and of course expanded on in our report, and to learn about 3 weeks later that a significant number of those people we had met actually perished in a suicide bomb attack in Lahore. It really brought it very, very close to us how severe the situation is in Pakistan. I should perhaps add a few words about the attitude of the government. As you can imagine, all the members of religious communities, including the Shias and the Christians, told us about discrimination, sharp practices, and human rights abuses. We also had several meetings with government officials, including the governors of Sindh and of Punjab, who both kind of very kindly kind of gave us time. We also had meetings with several ministry officials, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry for Religious Minorities in Islamabad. And certainly to me, what was so surprising about these meetings was that on a one-to-one basis, during these meetings, these government officials agreed with us, with our concerns, but freely admitted that the government itself was essentially being blackmailed by religious extremists. So it seems an extraordinary situation that a few very small groups of extremists, and you know that in Pakistan these groups have never really had much of an electoral success in national or provincial elections, but nevertheless they are able to impose a stranglehold on civic society, on religious minorities, of course, but even on the government of Pakistan. And that really is, I think, an extraordinary state of affair. And one cannot help thinking that with a little bit more willpower and a little bit more engagement with these issues, the Pakistani government should... Well, from my own point of view, of course, you know, I hope that this report will actually have some impact on the government of Pakistan. As I said during our launch, many members of the Pakistani government seem to be sympathetic to the issues which we addressed. And I can't help feeling that with a little bit more pressure and a few more incentives to take action, the Pakistani government could be convinced to introduce at least incremental change.
I'll invite comments from the audience or questions to our panellists, not to myself, to our panellists.